All right, guys. So we are on to our final reading for today about Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And this is the one that has the picture of him up in the top left corner. And he was born January 27th, 1756 in Salzburg, Austria. And he died on December 5th, 1791 in Vienna, Austria. And he was a composer of the classical era, which is what we are studying right now. Encouraged by his father, Leopold, Wolfgang Mozart began playing the clavier at age 4. By age 5, he began composing, and by 10, he had written his first symphony. Now, a clavier, it's sort of like a little keyboard. It's just a keyboard instrument. It's not quite like a harpsichord. It's sort of like the precursor to the piano, like the modern piano. He could play any music put in front of him on the clavier, organ, or violin, and he wrote his first opera at 14. Wolfgang was a child musical prodigy. If you don't know what a prodigy is, that's basically like somebody who displays unbelievable talent for something at a really young age, and it's kind of a miracle. It's like nobody quite understands how they got that information in their head or how they were able to do some certain skill, and that's very much true about Mozart. I will tell you, I have a daughter who is 4, and like she can't tie shoes. She can sing songs, but like she can't play stuff on the piano like at all. She can barely read easy words. And I think she's actually pretty smart. I'm sure I'm biased, but anyway, to think about somebody that is my daughter's age just like sitting down at the piano and playing anything it's just unbelievable. So it would be a treat to be able to see what he was like at that age. We'll never know. His father, a violinist, guided Wolfgang's career as a touring concert artist throughout Europe. In addition to presenting his son's talent to huge audiences, Leopold wanted Wolfgang to become familiar with the various styles of music popular throughout Europe. When they weren't touring, Wolfgang and his father were employed by the Archbishop of Salzburg, Leopold as an orchestra conductor, and Wolfgang as a violinist. The Archbishop recognized Wolfgang's talent and allowed father and son to take extended leaves of absence for concert tours. When the Archbishop died, his successor ended the concert tours and eventually fired Wolfgang. Leopold remained as orchestra conductor. In 1781, when he was 25, Mozart moved to Vienna, Austria, and became a full-time composer and music teacher. Although several of his compositions had been published, he soon realized that he earned less money as a composer than as a performer. Married in 1782, but his new wife Costanza, they found it difficult to deal with his inability to make money as a composer. She encouraged him to seek a position as a court musician. And so we talked about this a little bit when we were talking about Haydn the other day. Remember that Haydn worked for like the same House of Esterhazy for like 50 years, and they took really good care of him. Like they fed him, and he had clothes, and he had a great place to stay, and he got to write all the music that he wanted to. But remember, he was a servant. It was a job, but he was kind of like their slave, their like musical slave. And so he didn't seem to mind that too much. Mozart would have never stood up for that. He just never would have wanted that. He would have rather been poor and have a very difficult existence than to bow down and like be somebody's slave and write some kind of music that he didn't want to write. He was just stubborn. There's no way he was doing that. All right. In 1787, he took a job as the private musician to the Emperor of Austria. This gave him a small but steady income. As a court musician, Mozart was required to compose music for many occasions, both for public performances and for private gatherings hosted by the emperor. He continued in this position, composing music for the emperor as well as other music groups in Vienna until his death just 4 years later at the age of 35. In case you don't know what 35 looks like, I'm considerably older than Mozart was when he died. And I don't think I'm not quite an old lady yet. So that tells you how sad it is. That's really, really young. You maybe, some of your parents are maybe about that age and they're young, right? Eventually, all the hard work of continuous composing and trying to make money caused his health to fail. He died a very poor, overworked musical genius. Mozart wrote hundreds of musical works, including symphonies, operas, concertos, oratorios, and solo works for clavier. Most of these works were performed in Vienna with great success. Throughout his life, Mozart never had any difficulty in getting his music performed or published, and was very much admired and appreciated by audiences in Vienna and throughout Europe. So that is actually a little bit different than like back in the Baroque era. I think about like the life of Bach and how like his music was just basically played at church services and like not big concerts, and he would have been shocked to know that he was famous. Mozart was famous. Like, he was famous for being an awesome kid musician, but he was also famous for the stuff he wrote as an adult. The issue really is that it just was not a well-paying job. We now are used to the concept of like celebrity musicians. Like, if you get a recording contract or you get signed by somebody or whatever, then you're a big deal. You're a huge deal. You make lots of money. You're taken care of. You get to live in a fancy place, whatever. That system of doing things just wasn't even set up yet. So even though he was famous, he still struggled with money his whole life. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart was a short man with piercing eyes and long hair, which he groomed carefully. He was outgoing, always friendly, and enjoyed the company of others. I don't know about that always friendly part. Sometimes I think this book puts too positive a spin on some of these composers. He worked tirelessly as a composer and wrote a huge number of works during his short life. So we're going to talk a little bit about the stuff he wrote. So if you look at the next page, he composed works for orchestra, concertos, chamber music, keyboard music, operas, choral music, and vocal solos. And really the only reason he didn't compose those other things were they weren't really a thing yet. Like, they didn't really exist yet. So that's not his fault. Some factoids. One of Mozart's friends was Johann Christian Bach, who was the son of Johann Sebastian Bach, who you know all about now. For his entire life, even when he was a child, Mozart was considered a musical genius. He wrote several pieces for the glass harmonica, an instrument invented by Benjamin Franklin, which became very popular in Europe. It consisted of rotating glass bowls, which the performer plays by touching the rims of the bowls as they rotate. Have you ever been to like a fancy party or a wedding or something where like you're sitting there at the tables and you maybe are having dinner, and then you have like a fancy, not a wine glass, but just a drinking glass, and people will like lick their finger, get their finger wet, and they'll go around the rim of it, and it makes this like piercing high-pitched noise. Well, they made an entire instrument based on the concept of that. So the next time you want to do that annoying thing at a wedding thing, you can be like, hey, I'm playing Mozart for your wedding. What's your problem? Maybe don't say that to the bride or something. They get kind of mad. Mozart was very much influenced by the music of Franz Joseph Haydn, who we just got done talking about. So in 1756, he was born. In 1763, the Peace of Paris Treaty yields much of Canada to Great Britain. In 1764, London, England introduces the practice of numbering houses, so like having a house number so you have an address. In 1765, the British Parliament passes the Stamp Act for taxing American colonies. That was a big deal. That was part of when there was the Boston Tea Party and the Revolution was getting ramped up. You've heard all this stuff before in your history classes if you were paying attention, which I hope you were. In 1770, Handel's Messiah first performed in New York. In 1783, the American Revolutionary War ended. In 1787, the Constitution was signed in Philadelphia. In 1789 was the beginning of the French Revolution. And then finally, in 1791, Mozart died at age 35. And that was the same year that Haydn wrote the Surprise Symphony that you listened to yesterday.